So a few years...
Have you ever been sitting at a red light? Maybe you're a little distracted or just zoning out for a second.
No, absolutely. Staring at the radio or whatever.
Right, exactly. And you accidentally let your foot slip off the brake just as you, tap the gas pedal.
Oh, man. That is the worst feeling.
It really is. For that split second, the car lurches, the engine revs, the brakes groan, and your entire body just tenses up.
Yeah, because it's a completely visceral reaction to a mechanical contradiction.
Exactly. You are telling the machine to do two fundamentally opposing things at the exact same time. The physics of the car are they're fighting against themselves.
It is absolute mechanical dissonance. I mean, you're greening out the transmission, you're creating this terrible friction, and crucially, you are expending a massive amount of energy to go absolutely nowhere.
Right, it's a state of total paralysis caused by conflicting commands. And the thing is, we recognize how absurd that is in a car.
Oh, for sure. Nobody intentionally drives with both feet mashed down on the floorboards.
No one. Yet, as we open up today's stack of notes, we are looking at a space where people do the exact equivalent of hitting the gas and the brake at the same time, every single day.
And usually without even realizing they're doing it.
Exactly. We are talking about graphic design. And specifically, we are diving into a deceptively simple breakdown from Chapter 7 of Graphic Design for Dummies.
Yeah, which is a great resource, by the way.
It really is. Now, I know the title frames this as a guide for novice designers to understand the basics, but looking through these notes, the author's actually handing us a masterclass in human psychology.
They really are. It goes way deeper than just making things look pretty.
Right. We are unpacking the foundational principles of unity, repetition, rhythm, and proportion. Our mission for this deep dive today is to decode this secret visual language.
I love that framing, a secret visual language.
Because it is.
Yeah.
We want to take these concepts, which can frankly feel a bit abstract or intimidating, and turn them into a practical toolkit for you.
Yeah, because whether you are, building a slide presentation for work or just casually navigating the internet, these principles are quietly controlling how you perceive the world.
Totally.
Yeah.
But before we get our hands dirty interrogating those design choices, I want to take a quick second to welcome you to the conversation.
Welcome, everyone.
If you are enjoying these deep dives, if you value having a shortcut to being well-informed without drowning in an ocean of overwhelming tabs and info overload, please take a moment to support the channel.
Yeah, liking, subscribing, or sharing this with a friend is really what allows us to keep pulling these fascinating topics apart for you.
Absolutely. Okay, so to really grasp this, we have to start way before we ever look at a screen or a printed page.
Right, we have to actually zoom way out and look at the hardware running the simulation, so to speak.
We have to look at the human brain. Why do we actually see what we see?
It's really the only logical starting point. Long before you are a designer and long before you're a consumer buying a product based on its packaging, you are a human being. You're operating with this ancient, evolutionarily wired piece of biological hardware. And the notes introduce this foundational layer through Gestalt psychology.
Gestalt. Yeah, it's one of those words you hear thrown around in our school, or Psychology 101.
Oh, constantly.
The classic phrase usually attached to it, which I think is often attributed to Aristotle, is, "The whole is greater than the sum of its parts." But how does that actually manifest when I'm staring at a screen?
Well, to understand how it manifests, we have to look at what Gestalt psychology fundamentally proves about human perception.
Okay, I'm not tracking.
It proves that our brains do not passively record a collection of individual visual data points.
Yeah.
It's not like a camera sensor just blindly recording pixels.
Right, we don't just see a raw data feed of color and light.
Exactly. Instead, our brains are desperate to interpret those disparate elements as unified, meaningful wholes. The brain is an active participant in creating the image you think you were just passively observing.
That is wild to think about. And there is a brilliant thought experiment in the notes that perfectly illustrates this.
Oh, the dot experiment. I love this one.
Yes, I want you, listening right now, to try to picture this in your mind's eye. Imagine a pure white background.
Okay, pure white.
And on that background, there are 6 dots. The color of the dots is this vibrant red-orange.
Got it.
And they are arranged very deliberately. There's 1 dot at the top, then a horizontal row of 3 dots directly beneath it, and then 2 more dots trailing down vertically from the center of that row.
So when you visualize that specific arrangement, what is the very first thing that pops into your head?
Right. If you ask 100 people, the vast majority will instantly say they see a cross.
Yeah, or if you might see a kite.
Exactly. Or depending on someone's background, maybe they see a sword or perhaps just an arrow pointing down.
But the kicker here is almost nobody looks at that arrangement and says, I perceive 6 individual red-orange circular geometric shapes.
Never. They completely bypass the literal reality of what is physically in front of them.
Yeah, because it is literally just 6 dots on a page.
Which forces us to ask a rather profound question about our own biology. Like, why does the brain willfully ignore the literal physical reality of the image?
Well, we all carry this massive library of life experiences, right? Cultural symbols, survival instincts, all of it.
Right, so when the brain encounters those dots, it notices the alignment.
Exactly. Because they are aligned with mathematical precision, the brain assumes there must be an underlying reason. It basically refuses to accept coincidence.
So it instantly searches its database to assign meaning to that alignment, which results in the perception of a cross or a kite.
Yeah, and I love that it completely discards the color, too.
Oh yeah. The brain realizes that the red-orange hue doesn't help it solve the geometric puzzle of the shape, so it just throws that data point out until it becomes relevant later.
It's ruthlessly efficient, and it's an absolute goldmine for communication if you understand how to wield it.
How so?
Well, if you know that the human brain operates on this kind of aggressive autocomplete, you can fold that behavior into your design strategy.
Oh, I see. You can play with expectations.
Exactly. You can guide perception and even manipulate the way someone physically navigates a digital space or a printed page.
Okay, let me play devil's advocate here for a second, because I want to make sure I'm really grasping the mechanics of this.
Sure, go for it.
Are we basically saying that Gestalt psychology proves our brains are lazy?
Lazy.
Yeah, like we have this highly functioning biological supercomputer, but it's running a really aggressive autocomplete software just to save battery life.
That's a funny way to put it, but yeah.
And a good designer is essentially just a hacker exploiting that autocomplete.
I mean, lazy might carry a negative connotation, but biologically speaking, yes, absolutely.
Really?
Yeah. The brain consumes an immense amount of our body's daily energy. It cannot afford to independently process every single photon of light and every single pixel of reality from scratch every single second.
It would just crash.
Totally. So it relies on shortcuts. It looks for patterns, groupings, and familiar structures to rapidly render the environment. Gestalt principles are simply the documented rules of that autocomplete system.
Wow. And the notes break down several of these specific hacks, starting with the principle of proximity.
Right. Proximity is grouping by closeness.
The visual in the notes for this is pretty straightforward. Imagine a grid of evenly spaced squares.
Because the spacing is uniform, your brain says, okay, that is one single group of squares.
But if you take that exact same grid and just push the left half a few millimeters to the left and the right half a few millimeters to the right.
Introducing a slightly wider column of negative space down the middle.
Exactly. Your brain instantly updates its assessment. It now says, oh, those are two distinct separate groups.
The physical closeness of elements implies a relationship. If things share a tight physical space, our autocomplete just assumes they share a conceptual purpose.
We see this constantly in things like business cards, right?
Oh, all the time. If the phone number and the email address are grouped tightly together and the company logo is far away in another corner,
we instantly understand the functional relationship with the contact info without needing a big, bold label that says contact info.
Exactly. Following close behind proximity is similarity.
Similarity.
Okay. This principle states that items sharing visual characteristics like shape, color, size, or texture are perceived as part of a family.
Okay, so if I take that same grid of evenly spaced squares, so proximity says they're one group,
Right.
but I make one vertical column bright blue while the rest remain gray, my brain will override the proximity rule and instantly group the blue squares together.
Precisely. Color is an incredibly aggressive grouping mechanism.
Wow.
Shape works similarly too. If you scatter circles and triangles randomly across a page, the viewer's brain will subconsciously group all the circles into one family and all the triangles into another.
Regardless of where they sit on the page.
Exactly. It's an automatic sorting algorithm.
What about continuity? This one feels a bit more, I don't know, fluid to me.
It is a bit more fluid. The notes use an example of a wavy, undulating line, but right in the middle of the wave, there is a solid orange square sitting on top of it.
Okay, so a square blocking the middle of a wavy line.
Right. Continuity is the proof that human eyes are desperate to follow a path. They want momentum.
So in that wavy line example, the orange square completely obscures a significant chunk of the line.
Yeah, and logically you could argue you are looking at two separate, disconnected, curvy lines that just happen to be pointing at a square.
But no human brain actually sees it that way.
Never. We perceive a single, continuous, unbroken line that is passing behind the square. Our brain just draws the invisible connection.
It fills in the blank.
Exactly. And designers use this to physically guide a viewer's eye across a layout. You can use the curve of a photograph or the angle of a graphic to literally point the viewer's eye towards, say, the Buy Now button.
Which feels like it bleeds right into the concept of closure.
Oh, definitely.
This might be the most satisfying Gestalt principle to experience as a consumer. It's where the brain's autocomplete goes into absolute overdrive.
Closure relies on the fact that humans prefer complete closed shapes. If a visual is incomplete, or if there are significant gaps in the line work, the brain will project the missing information to close the shape itself.
The notes highlight how massive this is in logo design. It's the ultimate way to pack a dense amount of meaning into a really minimalist space.
Yeah, you don't draw the whole picture, you just draw the hints.
The classic example that isn't in the notes but always comes to mind is when you see a logo that uses negative space. Like the FedEx logo with a hidden arrow.
Yes, perfect example.
When a designer intentionally leaves a gap, and you, the viewer, are forced to physically fill in that gap with your mind to understand the image, it feels like a game.
It does. It feels like you've been let in on a secret.
Exactly. Why is that so satisfying?
That feeling is cognitive reward. When the brain successfully closes the shape, it literally releases a tiny hit of dopamine.
Oh wow, so it's chemical.
Yeah, it turns a passive viewer into an active participant. The design becomes sticky, it lodges in the memory because the viewer had to do a fraction of a second of work to actually decode it.
That makes so much sense. Okay, moving down the list, we hit figure ground.
This is the brain's need to distinguish a main subject, which is the figure from its background, the ground.
Like that famous optical illusion where you can either see an ornate vase, or if your brain flips the perspective, you see two faces in profile looking at each other in the negative space.
Exactly. The human visual system has to decide what is in the foreground and what is behind it. It struggles to see both simultaneously.
Has to pick one.
Right. And designers can manipulate that tension to create really striking, dual-meaning compositions that force the viewer to look twice.
And closely related to the stability of the foreground is the principle of symmetry and order.
Yes. The notes emphasize that humans have a deep psychological craving for symmetrical, well-ordered visual environments.
Because they make us feel safe.
Exactly. They signal predictability and stability.
The example provided in the text for this is brilliantly simple. It's just punctuation.
Oh, the brackets.
Yes. It shows a left-facing square bracket facing off against a right-facing curly bracket. I'm telling you, just looking at the mismatch in the notes makes me feel anxious.
It's visually jarring.
It feels structurally unsound, like a house built with two entirely different lengths of wood.
Right.
Then, right below it, it shows a left curly bracket perfectly mirrored by a right curly bracket. And it's like a visual exhale. My brain just relaxes.
The discomfort you feel with the mismatched brackets is your brain recognizing a lack of inherent structural integrity.
Structural integrity. That's a great way to phrase it.
When things are asymmetrical without a clear, deliberate reason, it signals chaos. This innate craving for order is the entire reason the graphic design industry relies so heavily on invisible grid systems.
Grids. We'll talk a lot more about those later.
Yeah, a grid is just a tool to enforce structural symmetry across a page or an app. It evenly divides space so that, on a subconscious level, the user feels that the environment is stable, professional, and trustworthy.
It's amazing. Okay, we have two final Gestalt principles to cover from the psychological layer. The first is common fate, which, I have to say, sounds incredibly dramatic.
It does sound like the title of a dystopian novel, doesn't it?
Totally.
But it's actually a very practical observation of movement. Common fate dictates that when visual elements are moving, or even just pointing in the same direction, they are perceived as a unified group.
The visual in the notes is a flock of arrows. You have a dozen arrows randomly scattered on the page. Most of them are pointing to the right, but maybe 3 of them are pointing to the left.
And even though they are all mixed together physically, your brain instantly segregates them.
The right pointing arrows are Team A. The left pointing arrows are Team B. They share a destination, so they share an identity.
Spot on. And finally, we arrive at
Connectedness.
This principle states that elements that are visually physically connected by a line or a shape are perceived as a stronger group than elements that simply sit near each other or share a color.
This one is fascinating because it seems to be the trump card. It can override all the other rules we just talked about.
It really can.
The notes show a scenario where circles are spread really far apart, so the proximity rule says they're definitely not a group. But then a simple line is drawn, physically linking the circles together like a string of pearls.
Instantly, connectedness overrides proximity. Space doesn't matter anymore. The line makes them a family.
Think about the practical application of this. You interact with it every time you open a web browser.
Oh, the navigation bar.
Yes. Look at a website's navigation menu. You have a horizontal bar across the top of the screen. Inside that bar are words: home, about, store, contact.
And conceptually, a storefront and a contact form are entirely different things.
Entirely different. But because they are all housed within that single connected horizontal bar, that background shape acts as a physical connector. It forces your brain to perceive all those disparate links as one single cohesive tool.
It's brilliant. Okay, so we've mapped out the psychology. We understand the lazy, auto-completing, pattern-hungry nature of the brain.
But theory is only half the battle, right?
Exactly. How does a designer take these psychological hacks and actively build cohesiveness into a tangible project?
This transitions us out of Gestalt and into the practical, functional flavors of Unity.
Right. We are moving from the invisible mechanics of the brain to the visible mechanics of the page. The overarching goal of any design is Unity making sure all the disparate parts sing the same song.
The notes break this down into specific, actionable categories, starting with visual unity. This is the baseline.
It ensures that the individual pieces of a design look like they were born in the same universe.
The author provides a really intimate example here using their own logo. It's a monogram, a stylized B, and an H.
And the point made here is so crucial. If you are going to put your written name next to this highly stylized graphic logo, you can't just pick a font at random.
No. You have to interrogate the visual properties of the logo itself and find a typeface that shares that exact DNA.
Because if the monogram is constructed with aggressive, thick, bold geometry, and you pair it with a typeface that is delicate, whisper-thin, and romantic,
They are going to repel each other.
exactly, they will look like two separate companies fighting for space on the exact same business card. There is zero visual unity.
The notes dive into a micro detail on this that really shifted my perspective. It's not just about matching the weight of the lines. The designer actively aligned the physical dimensions.
Ah, yes. The baselines.
Right. They made sure the very top edge, the graphic logo, perfectly aligned with the cap line of the text, the imaginary line resting on top of the capital letters, and they aligned the bottom of the logo to the baseline of the text.
So the logo and the text are physically locked into the exact same invisible horizontal corridor.
It's those micro decisions that separate amateur work from professional execution. A novice might just eyeball it and roughly center the logo next to the text.
But locking them to the same mathematical baselines creates a subliminal sense of order. The viewer's brain recognizes the shared geometry and immediately accepts the two elements as a unified brand.
Which feeds directly into the next category: repetition and proximity unity.
We talked about proximity as a psychological grouping tool earlier, but how does repetition unity function over the course of a larger project, like, say, a multi-page document or a massive website?
Repetition unity is the discipline of establishing a visual theme and ruthlessly sticking to it.
Think about the user experience of reading a magazine. A magazine is full of wildly different content, right? You have an interview, a fashion spread, a recipe.
But it always feels like one cohesive product.
Exactly. Why? Because the designer repeats certain structural elements on every single page.
The page numbers are always in the same spot, in the same font.
The spacing between columns is identical. The style of the pull quotes doesn't change from article to article.
The notes point out a trap here that I think is so common when people are first learning software. Young designers, or just anyone trying to make a nice PDF, often want to prove how creative they are on every single page.
Oh, the reinventing the wheel syndrome?
Yes. So page 1 has a blue header, page 2 has a red header with a drop shadow, page 3 uses a totally different layout. They are reinventing the wheel every time they hit next page.
And in doing so, they completely destroy the user's trust. The viewer's brain has to relearn how to read the document on every single page. It's exhausting.
The notes use a massive digital example to prove why this matters: Amazon.
Consider the Amazon interface.
What would happen if you searched for a book, and on the first results page, the search bar was at the top? But when you clicked to page 2, the search bar inexplicably moved to the bottom left corner.
And on page 3, it was hidden behind a hamburger menu.
I would close the tab. I would assume the site was broken, or I'd be so frustrated by the friction of having to hunt for the basic tools that I'd just give up entirely.
Exactly. The lack of repetition creates a hostile user experience. Repetition in UI, keeping the search bar, the shopping cart, the navigation links in the exact same pixel location across millions of pages, creates a safe, predictable, error-free environment.
Repetition builds trust.
It really does. That brings us to color and typographic unity.
Color is relatively intuitive, I think. Pick a cohesive palette and don't stray from it. But the notes highlight a specific pitfall with typographic unity that I see everywhere. It introduces the rule of 2.
Typographic unity is best achieved through strict limitation. The general rule of thumb is to limit your entire project to just 1 or 2 typefaces.
Because when you start introducing 3, 4, or 5 fonts, the visual hierarchy collapses into a ransom note.
It's chaos. But the crucial part of the rule of 2 is how you actually select that pair.
And this is where the pushback happens. The notes explicitly warn against pairing 2 typefaces that are too similar. They specifically name-drop Helvetica and Arial. Now, to the untrained eye, those fonts are basically identical twins. So logically, shouldn't they unify perfectly because they look the same?
It's super counterintuitive, but no. That similarity is exactly what ruins the unity. If you pair Helvetica and Arial, they don't have enough distinct contrast to look like a deliberate design system.
They just look slightly off.
It falls into the uncanny valley of typography.
It's the sartorial equivalent of trying to wear a black shirt and black pants from 2 different brands.
Oh, that is the perfect analogy.
Right, one is a cool, slightly bluish black, and the other is a warm brownish black. You don't look like Johnny Cash. You don't look coordinated. You just look like you got dressed in a dark closet and made a laundry mistake.
The subtle mismatch creates visual friction. The brain notices the tiny discrepancies in the letter forms and fixates on the error.
So how do you fix it?
To achieve true typographic unity with 2 fonts, you need intentional, aggressive contrast. You pair a classic serif font, the ones with the little structural feet on the ends of the letters, with a modern, clean sans serif font.
Or you pair a massive, heavy, bold weight with a delicate lightweight.
Exactly. The contrast makes it explicitly clear to the viewer that this was a deliberate structural choice, not an accident.
The last functional flavor of unity mentioned here is spatial unity. This seems to be about the invisible air in the room.
It is. Spatial unity is about managing the empty space between your elements consistently.
Okay.
If you establish a certain padding around your images or a certain gap between your headlines and your body copy, that spacing creates a rhythm. It sets a subconscious expectation for the pacing of the information.
And if you suddenly tighten up that spacing halfway through a document for no reason,
The viewer feels a kind of spatial claustrophobia. The pacing just feels broken.
Okay, so we've got the psychological hacks and we have the functional rules for organizing a layout. But here is where the notes pivot, and I think this is where the conversation gets incredibly rich.
Yes, moving beyond just structure.
Because unity isn't just about making sure your fonts match and your spacing is neat. It's not just structural, it's conceptual. It's about the soul and the ethics of the design.
This is the threshold where design stops being mere decoration and becomes strategic communication. Conceptual unity dictates that the cohesive theme of your project has to go deeper than aesthetics.
The visual choices must actively endorse and articulate the core narrative of the message.
If the visuals look beautiful but contradict the message, the design has failed. Full stop.
There is a brilliant case study in the notes about the Impossible Burger.
Oh, this is a great example.
For context, if anyone doesn't know, this is a highly engineered, plant-based hamburger patty designed to look, cook, and bleed like real beef. It's marketed to people who want to reduce their meat intake, but still want the visceral experience of a burger.
Right.
The notes pose a hypothetical. Imagine you are the designer tasked with branding this product. Why is a vibrant hot pink a terrible color choice?
To answer that, you have to really dissect the dual goals of the product. First, Impossible Foods wants to reframe the entire concept of meat. They want to prove a plant can be a burger.
Right.
Second, they have to appeal to the primal, savory cravings of a traditional meat eater. Hot pink completely destroys that conceptual unity.
Totally. Hot pink screams artificiality. It evokes bubblegum, neon signs, plastic toys, or cheap candy.
Yeah.
If you wrap a revolutionary organic plant-based food product in hot pink, the consumer's brain immediately assumes it's full of synthetic chemicals. The visual language actively fights the product's reality.
So the immediate pivot for a novice designer might be, okay, it's plant-based. Let's use bright, vibrant leaf green. Green means healthy.
But green is just as much of a failure.
Exactly. Why?
Because green only tells 50% of the story.
Yeah.
Bright green successfully communicates plants, but it completely ignores the hearty meat substitute narrative. Absolutely no one on Earth wants to bite into a bright green hamburger patty.
No, it triggers an instinctual revulsion, like eating mold.
Right. The visual would isolate the core demographic. So how do you unify the concept?
The notes suggest utilizing deep, rich colors. Dark burgundy, warm, earthy reds, or heavy, organic browns.
It's a masterstroke of conceptual unity. A dark, earthy burgundy feels rooted in nature, supporting the plant-based reality.
But simultaneously, it evokes the deep, savory, cooked qualities of a perfectly seared steak.
It triggers the exact right salivary response. The color choice alone does the heavy lifting of unifying the product's entire dual identity.
It really proves that color is never just an aesthetic preference. It is a profound strategic decision.
And as we elevate this idea of deeper unity, the notes transition into cultural unity. This is a space that requires immense sensitivity, and the author actually steps out from behind the textbook tone to share some deeply personal anecdotes.
I really appreciated this section. The author discusses their experiences teaching and practicing design overseas, specifically in Doha, Qatar, and Istanbul, Turkey.
And the thesis of this section is about the absolute necessity of cultural humility in design.
When you are operating as a designer, especially on forward-facing, public projects that intersect with cultures outside your own lived experience, you have to recognize the limits of your expertise.
Right. The author explicitly notes that while they were highly confident in their technical command of typography and grid systems, they recognized they were largely illiterate regarding the deep, nuanced cultural semiotics of Arabic and Islamic visual traditions.
And the prescribed solution is collaboration. You don't guess, you don't assume.
When the author worked on these projects, they actively integrated local experts and community members into the conceptual phase.
Because cultural unity isn't just about avoiding offense, it's about ensuring that the visual language resonates authentically with the people who actually live inside that culture.
You simply cannot manufacture that authenticity from the outside looking in.
The notes take a very firm ethical stance on this, warning against the trap of cultural appropriation in the pursuit of a, quote, cool aesthetic.
Yeah, it states unequivocally that it is improper and unethical to extract sacred or deeply significant cultural elements and recontextualize them for commercial gain, especially when it trivializes their original meaning.
They cite two very specific examples: the Eye of Ra from ancient Egyptian iconography and the eagle from Native American culture.
Let's say I'm designing a logo for a trendy new coffee shop, and I think, wow, the Eye of Ra looks incredibly striking and mysterious. We'll use that as the icon.
The problem is that the Eye of Ra is not merely a collection of geometric shapes. It is an ancient, potent symbol loaded with millennia of religious, cultural, and protective significance.
Right.
When a designer strips away all of that historical weight just to make a disposable logo for a latte brand, they are aggressively fracturing the cultural unity. They are reducing a culture's heritage to a clip art novelty.
The notes insist that if your project demands the use of cultural iconography, typography, or color palettes, your primary responsibility is deep, respectful research. The values of the culture must take precedence over your desire for a trendy visual.
But I do appreciate that the notes acknowledge human fallibility. People make mistakes. Designers misinterpret things.
The advice given for when you inevitably stumble in this arena is very grounded. Don't get defensive.
Exactly. Own up to the misstep immediately, offer a genuine apology, take the design down, learn the history you missed, and commit to not repeating the error. Humility is the only path forward.
I think we have to pause here and ask the crucial question for the audience. So what does this all mean for you?
Yeah, if you are listening to this and you aren't a graphic designer, you aren't building a brand identity for a plant-based burger, and you aren't doing public works in Istanbul, why does conceptual and cultural unity matter to your daily life?
Because you are a target. We are all consumers existing in a hyper-visual capitalist landscape.
We are bombarded by thousands of design messages every single day, all vying for our attention and our wallets.
Understanding these principles is like taking the red pill in the Matrix. You start to see the code. You develop visual literacy.
When a brand launches a new campaign, you don't just see the pretty colors. You can instantly audit their intent.
You can spot the difference between a brand that has authentically woven conceptual and cultural unity into their core DNA versus a corporation that is cynically slapping a trendy cultural motif onto cheap packaging to manufacture a false sense of authenticity.
It immunizes you against visual manipulation.
It really does. It allows you to consume media critically rather than passively.
Yeah.
Now, if unity is the overarching harmony of our visual song, the notes introduce the next foundational principle to provide the structure: repetition.
And they use a fantastic musical metaphor to explain the dynamic.
Yes. The author says that repetition is the drum beat of graphic design. It is the steady, driving, reliable pulse that keeps the whole thing moving forward.
But if a song is nothing but a relentless, unchanging drum beat for 5 minutes, the audience falls asleep.
Right, so visual variations are introduced as the good guitar solo.
The solo elevates the song, provides a spike of excitement, and breaks the monotony.
But you absolutely must have that steady drum beat underneath, or the solo just sounds like chaotic noise.
It is a constant balancing act between structure and surprise. Repetition is the unsexy, necessary labor of ensuring your visual elements work cohesively across an entire ecosystem.
The notes explore several tactical ways designers enforce this drumbeat, beginning with the repetition of shape and color.
We briefly touched on color earlier regarding unity, but there's a highly pragmatic rule of thumb hidden in this section, the 2 to 5 colors rule.
The notes readily admit that managing a sprawling palette of 10 or 15 colors is a nightmare. Unless you are a master colorist, the colors will inevitably start fighting for dominance.
Restricting a palette to a maximum of 2 to 5 colors enforces discipline, but constraint often breeds the most elegant solutions.
The notes anticipate the immediate problem with this rule, though. What if I'm designing a complex dashboard with multiple graphs and data points, and I strictly need more than 4 colors to differentiate the data, but I want to maintain the unity of my 4-color palette?
The secret weapon is tints. The notes explain that a tint is essentially just an opacity or transparency adjustment.
Huh.
If your core brand color is a specific navy blue, you can use that blue at 100% opacity, but you can also use it at 60% opacity, 30% opacity, and 10% opacity.
Suddenly, your restrictive 4-color palette has blossomed into a deeply nuanced 12 or 16 color system.
And the brilliance of tints is that they are mathematically guaranteed to harmonize. Because they all share the exact same base DNA, they can never clash.
The only variable you have to actively manage is ensuring there is enough stark contrast between the steps, say between the 60% and 30% tint, so that the human eye can clearly differentiate them.
It's a brilliant cheat code for complexity. The notes also dig into the repetition of pattern and texture.
For patterns, it acknowledges that modern software has made this incredibly accessible. It specifically calls out Adobe Illustrator's Object Repeat Grid function as a way to instantly generate complex geometry.
And it points to a resource called Subtle Patterns by TopTall for finding pre-made, unobtrusive website backgrounds.
But the discussion on texture is where the psychology gets really profound.
Texture is fascinating because it is an act of sensory cross-wiring.
Sensory cross-wiring.
Yeah, when a designer introduces a visual texture, a wood grain, a rusted metal, a soft watercolor wash, they are attempting to engage a secondary sense. They're using vision to trigger the audience's tactile memory.
Even though we consciously know we're looking at a perfectly flat, smooth smartphone screen, a high-quality visual texture forces our brain to imagine what the object would feel like if we dragged our fingernails across it.
It's almost like a manufactured synesthesia.
And the notes provide a side-by-side example that perfectly demonstrates how aggressively texture can steer a narrative. It shows the exact same word, hustle, written twice, using the exact same typographic script.
But the treatments are night and day.
The first version of the word hustle has this gritty, distressed, scratched-up, asphalt-like texture applied to it. The edges are rough and degraded.
Right. And the second version has a perfectly smooth, shimmering, silk-like texture with a subtle gradient that catches the light.
If you ask an audience to define the concept of the word based solely on the visual, the definitions will diverge wildly.
Completely. The gritty version feels like an urban, street-level hustle. It evokes struggle, scraping by, working on the pavement. It feels scrappy and tough.
While the silky version feels like a high-dollar corporate luxury hustle, it evokes tailored suits, expensive cars, and smooth talking.
The word is identical, the font is identical, but the applied texture, fundamentally rewrites the entire conceptual narrative.
It proves that texture is never just a decorative afterthought to make something look cool. It is a load-bearing communication tool.
However, just like the guitar solo analogy, the notes warn that restraint is paramount. If you layer a gritty texture over a wood grain background next to a shiny metallic button, you overwhelm the tactile senses.
It's the equivalent of a band where the drummer, the bassist, and the guitarist are all trying to play a solo at the exact same time. It's just noise.
Exactly. Okay, so we've established the visible drum beats, repeating colors, shapes, and textures. But the notes execute a massive pivot here.
They move from repeating the things we can clearly see to the obsessive repetition of the things we cannot see, the invisible repetitions.
This is arguably the most critical component of professional design. We are talking about space repetition and grid repetition, the architecture of the void.
Before we get to the philosophy of it, I have to vent for a second, because the notes bring up a trap that drives me absolutely crazy, and apparently it's the #1 mistake design students make, the software trap.
Oh, I know where this is.
The human hand and the naked eye are simply not precise enough to maintain millimeter perfection across a dozen pages. The space beneath the first headline might be 10 pixels, but the space beneath the second headline might be 12 pixels.
And the author demands, not suggests, but demands, that the solution is utilizing paragraph styles.
Yes, you take 10 minutes at the beginning of the project to set the mathematical rules. You tell the software, every time I format a header, it must be exactly 24-point font, bold, maroon, with exactly 15 pixels of empty space above it and exactly 8 pixels of empty space below it.
Then you just highlight text and click the style. The software physically enforces the mathematical space repetition.
And the bonus is, if the client comes back a week later and says, actually, let's make the headers navy blue, you change the core rule once, and the software updates all 50 headers across the entire document instantaneously.
It is a massive workflow efficiency. But let's dig much deeper into why that consistent mathematical space repetition actually matters to the end user. Why does an error of 2 pixels even register to a reader?
This is where the notes tie layout, designed directly to evolutionary biology.
This was the absolute mind-blowing moment in the text for me. The author posits that our visual system is biologically hardwired to spot tiny spatial inconsistencies in our environment.
Why? Because tens of thousands of years ago, when our ancestors were walking through the brush, the ability to instantly recognize a slight visual anomaly wasn't about aesthetics. It was literally a matter of life and death.
It's the survival mechanism of pattern recognition. Imagine walking down a dirt path. Your brain quickly establishes the visual rhythm of the environment, the texture of the dirt, the spacing of the leaves, the shapes of the fallen branches.
If there is a stick lying across the path, it conforms to the expected visual pattern.
But if there's a venomous snake lying across the path, the scales, the slight curve, the subtle disruption in the spatial pattern breaks the rhythm of the environment.
And what does our brain do when it detects that broken pattern? It aggressively sounds a biological alarm bell.
It instantly hijacks all of our conscious attention, pulls it away from whatever we were daydreaming about, and locks our focus onto that tiny inconsistency so we can evaluate whether we need to run or fight.
Exactly. Now, translate that ancient survival hardware to modern graphic design. If a user is reading a dense annual report and the spatial repetition is mathematically perfect, the gaps between the paragraphs are identical, the user's brain relaxes.
It feels safe. It allocates 100% of its processing power to actually comprehending the message of the words.
But if the designer was sloppy and suddenly on page 4, one single paragraph has an extra 3 millimeters of blank space above it,
The alarm bells ring. The user's brain subconsciously detects the broken pattern. It flags the 3 millimeter gap as an environmental inconsistency.
and instantaneously the brain redirects processing power away from the text and towards the spatial error. The user might not consciously articulate, the leading on this paragraph is slightly off, but they will suddenly feel a vague sense of annoyance, fatigue, or distraction.
By failing to repeat the invisible space, the designer has accidentally triggered a biological survival reflex that actively ruins the communication.
That is profound. A misaligned text box is basically triggering the snake on the path response. It's visual friction.
Which highlights why invisible frameworks are non-negotiable. And the ultimate manifestation of invisible space repetition is the grid.
Grid repetition. The notes describe a grid as a structural framework of intersecting guidelines used to organize content.
But they are very careful to stress that a grid is not a cage. It isn't meant to stifle creativity or force every design to look like a boring spreadsheet. A grid is an accelerator for decision-making.
A grid eliminates the paralyzing terror of a blank canvas. There are incredibly complex grid systems, multi-column grids for newspapers, intricate modular grids for magazines, baseline grids for typography.
But the notes use the most elementary example possible to prove the inherent flexibility of the concept. A basic 3x3 grid, 9 equal squares on a page.
The author calculates that even with just this elementary 3x3 structure, a designer can generate 512 distinct layout variations. 512.
You could map a massive hero photograph across the top 2 rows and place 3 tight columns of text in the bottom row. You could run a vertical navigation bar down the entire left column and float a video player in the center right.
And the genius is that because all 512 of those wildly different layouts are anchored to the exact same invisible mathematical skeleton, you can place them side by side in a presentation, and they will feel perfectly unified.
The grid establishes a subconscious cadence. When you scale this up to massive digital products, like an enterprise software dashboard with hundreds of different screens, the grid is what ensures that the submit button is in the exact same relative physical space on screen 40 as it is on screen 1.
But the notes do offer a critical caveat. The grid is a system of rules, and once you have mastered the rules, you are permitted to strategically break them.
Deliberate violation of the grid is a powerful tool. If you have established a rigid, orderly grid for 20 pages, and on page 21, a massive, vibrant image intentionally bleeds across the grid lines and ignores the margins, it creates a shockwave of visual interest.
It screams to the viewer, this specific element is so monumental that it cannot be contained by the system.
But again, it must be purposeful. If it looks accidental, we are back to the snake on the path. And this concept of setting an expectation and then manipulating it transitions us perfectly into the third major principle: rhythm.
Rhythm is the synthesis of what we've just discussed.
Yeah.
When you combine the steady drumbeat of repetition with the structural framework of the grid and you let them play out over time or space, you generate a visual tempo.
The notes define rhythm as relying on repetition, but crucially incorporating the variation of elements to create a sense of movement and flow. And they lean back into a musical metaphor, comparing visual rhythm to a jazz band.
It's a highly apt comparison. Think about a live jazz performance. The rhythm section establishes a foundational tempo.
But the individual musicians are not playing like robots. They are interpreting the melody, improvising, syncopating.
The saxophone player might drag slightly behind the beat or play a sudden flurry of notes, but they are always tethered to the underlying structure. They are given the freedom to diverge because they ultimately serve the overarching unity of the song.
Visual rhythm operates the exact same way. It can be established through a progressing sequence of colors fading from dark to light as you scroll down a page.
It can be created by the progressive spacing of elements, where items get closer and closer together to imply accelerating speed. The viewer's brain internalizes this rhythm very quickly, and it becomes a baseline expectation.
And that expectation is a vulnerability that a designer can exploit. What happens when you build a hypnotic rhythm and then you purposefully violently break it?
The author illustrates this with an absolute phenomenal musical example. They pull a lyric from the Beastie Boys' classic track, Intergalactic.
I am so glad they included this.
I'm going to read the exact lyrics printed in the notes. I am known to do the wop, also known for the Flintstone flop. Tammy D gets biz on the crops. Beastie Boys known to let the beat. Drop.
It is the textbook definition of manipulating rhythm.
When you are listening to that track, there is this relentless, driving, heavy mechanical beat. It is hypnotic. But right before the word drop, the production entirely cuts out.
The beat vanishes. There is a fraction of a second of absolute dead silence. The established rhythm is shattered.
And analyze what physically happens to the listener in that fraction of a second.
They lean in. Their brain practically short circuits. The autocomplete pattern was humming along and suddenly it hits a wall. The brain says, whoa, the environment changed. What is happening next?
Precisely. The sudden void in the audio creates a vacuum that sucks in all of the listener's attention. The broken expectation creates a moment of hyper-awareness.
The notes explain that a designer can orchestrate that exact same psychological response visually. If a user is scrolling down a website and the rhythm of alternating text and image blocks is steady and predictable, inserting a massive area of blank negative space or sudden jarring change in scale acts as the visual beat drop.
It is the ultimate method for hijacking a user's attention, and pointing it squarely at your most important call to action.
But, and this goes back to our discussion on the grid, if you break the rhythm by accident because you didn't use paragraph styles and your spacing is just sloppy, it doesn't land like a cool, intentional Beastie Boys pause.
It just looks like an amateur mistake. It lacks the intent required to earn the audience's focus.
It just triggers the alarm bell. So we have established unity as the goal, repetition as the drumbeat, and rhythm as the tempo. We arrive now at the final piece of the architectural puzzle explored in the notes: proportion and scale.
We have our harmony and our beat. Now we have to sit at the mixing board and balance the volume of the individual instruments. Proportion and scale dictate how different elements relate to one another in size, ensuring that the visual hierarchy aligns with the informational hierarchy.
The foundational concept introduced here is the hierarchy of scale. The rule is brutally simple, but often ignored. The human eye will invariably be drawn to the largest visual element in a composition first.
Designers use immense scale to create an entry point, and then step down the sizes to create a controlled, sequential path for the viewer's eye to follow. Big header, medium subheader, small body text.
The notes offer a stripped-down example. Imagine a canvas with a square, some circles, and some triangles. If the designer makes the square massive and keeps the other shapes tiny, the viewer looks at the square first. It's unquestionable.
But the text immediately warns about the danger of sending mixed signals, where the designer accidentally fights their own hierarchy.
Yes, the designer's trap of conflicting variables. Let's say you have that massive square, so its size demands attention. But for some aesthetic reason, you lower the opacity of the square to 10%, making it faint, washed out, and barely visible.
Meanwhile, you make the tiny triangles solid, vibrant, aggressive, neon green.
Yeah.
You've just created a cognitive traffic jam.
It's the gas and the brake pedal again.
Exactly. The brain receives two conflicting commands. The massive scale of the square yells, "Look at me first." But the high contrast and vibrant color of the triangle scream, "No, look at us first."
The viewer's eye bounces frantically back and forth, unsure of where the journey is supposed to begin. You have to ensure that your design choices, scale, color, contrast, and placement are all cooperating to amplify the same primary target.
But beyond just making things bigger or smaller to grab attention, the notes delve into something much more profound. They delve into harmonic proportion.
This is the intersection where graphic design leaves the realm of subjective art and enters the realm of pure, immutable mathematics.
The math of beauty. That's a fascinating concept. The notes highlight two primary harmonic proportions that have been empirically observed to produce visual compositions that humans find inherently, almost inexplicably pleasing. The first is legendary, the golden ratio.
The golden ratio, closely tied to the Fibonacci sequence. Mathematically, it is a ratio that approximates to 1.618 to 1.
Now, a ratio of 1.618 doesn't sound particularly poetic on its own.
It just sounds like a random fraction. But what I find absolutely mind-blowing about this, and the notes really emphasize this, is that this proportion was not cooked up by an art director in an ad agency.
It was discovered in the foundational architecture of the natural world. The visual examples provided are stunning. The spiraling chambers of a nautilus shell expand outward at exactly the rate of the golden ratio.
The arrangement of C's in the center of a sunflower, the swirl of a hurricane, the proportions of the human body. This specific mathematical sequence is hard-coded into biology and physics.
And because human beings evolved surrounded by this specific proportion, our brains developed a deep subconscious affinity for it. It feels right because it looks like nature.
For millennia, humanity has recognized this inherent beauty and reverse-engineered it into our manufactured systems. The notes point out that the golden ratio governs the structural dimensions of the Parthenon in Greece, the Great Pyramid of Giza, the Taj Mahal.
Leonardo da Vinci explicitly used it to map the composition of the Mona Lisa. It transcends visuals, too. The author notes that the underlying structural timing of Beethoven's Fifth Symphony aligns with the ratio.
It's staggering to think about. The notes suggest that because this ratio appears so relentlessly across historical architecture, fine art, classical music, and natural biology, many theorists believe it points to a universal order underlying the fabric of reality.
Now, it does add a disclaimer that some modern critics dismiss its relevance as confirmation bias. But practically speaking, designers still actively use the golden ratio today.
They use it to establish column widths in magazine layouts, to set the ideal line height for typography, and to crop photographs, because leveraging that ancient math taps directly into the brain's craving for natural symmetry.
It mathematically manufactures the feeling of safety we discussed during the Gestalt principles. While the golden ratio is quite complex to calculate on the fly, the second harmonic proportion covered in the notes is perhaps the most actionable, practical takeaway for anyone listening, regardless of your design experience.
It is the rule of thirds.
The rule of thirds. If you've ever opened the camera app on your phone and wondered why there was an option to turn on a grid of lines, this is why. The technique requires you to divide your visual canvas into 9 equal parts using a 3x3 grid 2 equally spaced vertical lines intersecting 2 equally spaced horizontal lines.
The core philosophy behind the rule of thirds is a deliberate subversion of human instinct. When a novice picks up a camera, their overwhelming instinct is to place the subject, say, a person's face dead center in the middle of the frame.
It feels safe, but it often results in a static, lifeless, mugshot-style composition. The rule of thirds challenges you to offset the subject.
By forcing the focal point away from the center and placing it along those grid lines, or specifically at the 4 points where the vertical and horizontal lines intersect, you instantly introduce dynamic tension and visual interest.
The notes actually back this up with concrete eye-tracking data, which I found fascinating. They studied where the human eye naturally gravitates when looking at an image framed with this grid, and the distribution isn't equal.
When people look at a composition, their eyes don't just dart randomly to the 4 intersections. The top left intersection completely dominates. It captures 41% of the viewer's initial attention, nearly half.
The bottom left intersection gets 25%, the top right gets 20%, and that bottom right intersection is largely ignored, pulling only 14% of the focus.
That isn't just an interesting trivia fact, that is actionable intelligence. If you are designing a billboard, a website header, or a political mailer, and you have a critical piece of information that the viewer absolutely must see, the brand logo, the protagonist size, the donate button, you now know with mathematical certainty that you should anchor it near that top left intersection.
You're placing the most important data exactly where the eye naturally wants to land. It's so universally effective that the software industry has institutionalized it. The notes mention that when you activate the crop tool in Adobe Photoshop, the software doesn't give you a blank box. It automatically overlays the rule of thirds grid over your image.
Yes, and the author provides a phenomenal practical tip for utilizing that grid when cropping portraits. They advise looking at where those top guidelines intersect and manually adjusting the crop until the subject's eye line perfectly aligns with those points.
For example, you maneuver the image until the vertical third line drops straight down the bridge of the nose, and the top horizontal third line crosses directly through the pupils of the eyes.
I've actually tried this since reading the notes. If you take an average, awkwardly framed smartphone photo of a friend and you recrop it so their eyes lock onto those top intersections, the transformation is instantaneous.
It suddenly looks like a still frame from a high-budget cinema release. It anchors the organic human face to an invisible mathematical structure. It also forces you to be intentional about negative space. Instead of empty space just awkwardly existing around a centered subject, the empty space off to the side becomes an active part of the composition, giving the subject room to look into.
However, the author is careful to include one final emphatic warning about relying too heavily on the rule of thirds. And it circles back to everything we've talked about regarding intent. The warning is simply, don't force fit it.
Exactly. The rule of thirds is a powerful guideline, but it is not a constitutional law. If you are cropping a photo and strictly adhering to the grid means you have to slice out critical context, like chopping off the arm of a secondary character or losing the product in the background, just to get an eyeball into an intersection, you are failing the design.
You must break the rule. The ultimate message, the context, and the medium must always dictate the final choice over a mathematical formula.
So as we pull all of these threads together, what does this actually leave us with? If we synthesize this entire deep dive into the notes, we can look at these principles not as isolated software tricks, but as a hierarchy of communication. Unity is the ultimate destination. It is the cohesive conceptual harmony that ensures your visual message aligns with your psychological intent. It ensures you aren't hitting the gas and the brake at the same time.
Repetition is the invisible structural drumbeat, the discipline required to build that unity. Rhythm is the intentional manipulation of pacing to keep the human brain engaged and awake. And proportion is the underlying ancient mathematics that balances the volume of the entire composition.
It is genuinely a paradigm shift.
Okay.
Once you understand the mechanics of this, it permanently alters the way you interface with the built environment. Which brings us perfectly to our final thought.
Yes. I want to leave you with a challenge to mull over as you go about the rest of your day. Now that you are aware of the hidden mechanics, now that you know the ancient mathematics of the golden ratio, the eye-tracking heat maps of the rule of thirds, and the biological survival-based alarm bells that are triggered by a misaligned text box, take a hard look at the visual world around you.
Look at the interface of the apps on your phone. Look at the billboards on your commute. Look at the layout of the menu at your favorite restaurant.
How much of your daily attention is truly autonomously your own, and how much of it is being quietly, expertly directed by a designer sitting behind a screen who knows exactly how to play the drumbeat of your visual perception?
That is a phenomenal, slightly unsettling question to end on. I promise you, you are never going to look at a mismatched font, a moving search bar, or a hot pink advertisement the exact same way ever again. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the hidden psychological language of design.
If you enjoyed unpacking this massive topic with us, please remember to support the channel, like, subscribe, or share this with someone who loves peeling back the curtain to learn how things really work behind the scenes.
Until next time, keep your eyes open.